rupamadyam prabhavati jagataha anekadha anugrahaya prakshina klesharashihi vishama vishadharaha anekavaktra subhogi sarvajnana prasutihi bhojagaparikaraha pritaye yasya nityam devo hishaha savo vyad sita vimalatanuho yogado yogayuktaha yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarotam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi abahu purushakaram shankhachakrasidharinam sahasrashirasam shvetam pranamami patanjalim Srimate Anantaya Nagarajaya Namo Namaha Patanjala Mahabhashya Charaka Pratisamskritaihi Manovakaya doshanam Hartre ahipataye namaha Om. So, greetings friends. Last week we were completing the Sutra 130, which was presentation of the obstacles that we are facing in the yoga path. And what Patanjali is saying is that we have at least 9 different kind of obstacles that we can have, and he is presenting this through the Sutra 130. Vyadhi sthana samshaya pramada alasya avirati bhranti darshana alabdha bhumikatva anavasthitattvani chitta vikshepaha te antarayaha. He uses the word antaraya, which means an obstacle, that means that which brings us to a halt in our journey. And he says one very interesting thing. He says that these are obstacles for what is known as chitta vikshepa kind of persons. Obstacles are always there for us. We are in a state where we are living in life where different things can come in our path. But some people look at it as an obstacle, some people look at it as an opportunity, and that is what Patanjali is saying there. He is clarifying for which kind of people these things are an obstacle. Chitta vikshepaha te antarayaha. There is a category of people that are called chitta vikshepas, and for such people this is an antaraya. So the logical question can come, who are these chitta vikshepas? That is what is the next question. The literal translation for chitta vikshepa means those whose mind is not stable. Chitta means mind, Vikshepa means some kind of agitation. For somebody whose mind is agitated, it is not stable, it is not steady. How do we know that somebody's mind is not steady, somebody's mind is not stable? That is is an interesting question, because when you ask somebody, is your mind stable, they will say, of course it is. But it may not be the case. Nobody is going to say, no, I've got an unstable mind. Especially in modern times, where if you say I'm unsteady mind, you will be immediately taken to a psychiatric hospital, which most people don't want. So we don't say that. But how do we know that somebody has got a mind that is not stable? So that is where the logical extension comes. The next sutra defines who is a Chitta Vikshepa, or at least how we can identify a Chitta Vikshepa. He presents the sutra, Dukkha Daurmanasya Angame Jayatva Shvasa Prashvasaha Vikshepa Saha Bhuvaha. Vikshepa Saha Bhuvaha means these are accompanying characteristics of a person who is a Chitta Vikshepa. Almost to say that it's like the symptoms of a person whose mind is unsteady. So he presents 4 symptoms: Dukkha, Daurmanasya, Angame Jayatva, Shvasa Prashvasa. So 4 symptoms or 4 characteristics are presented. The first one is called Dukkham. What is Dukkham? In a very simple way, we can define Dukkham as some kind of suffering, any kind of suffering. So when somebody is suffering, their mind is not going to be stable, their mind is going to be agitated. How to understand the word Dukkham? The word Dukkham is derived from the etymology, which is Dushtam Kam Kham Dukkham. Dushtam Kham Dukkham. The word Kham represents the space in the heart, what is called Hridaya Kasham. We have a space in the heart. When the space in the heart is constricted, it starts to get tighter. That is called Dukkham. It's not open, it's closing. When the heart space is closing, this is called Dukkham. Now this is very interesting, because the derivation of Dukkham is not dependent on what is causing the Dukkham. We in modern era, we are always blaming, oh, this is suffering for me. Oh, spicy dosa is suffering for me. Rain is suffering for me. This person is suffering for me. That person is suffering for me. We are blaming it on the external. Whereas the origin of the word is not dependent on the objects. It is dependent on what is the feeling inside we have. Because the same situation can cause dukkham for somebody and sukham for somebody else. For example, yesterday in the evening, I was watching little television where they were playing back the highlights of a cricket match which goes on between India and South Africa. India wins, South Africa loses. Same situation, it's the game. One team feels dukkham because they've lost. One team feels expansion because they won. So it's not that the situation is the problem, it's the feeling that creates. Last week we had severe rain, severe cyclones here in Chennai. So much water, so many problems because of that. And when you look at it, a lot of people were inconvenienced. And therefore there was a lot of suffering for a lot of these people. But when I speak to my daughter and her classmates in school, they are so happy because there is no school. The same situation causes sukham. They are more happy to remain in the house and play some games, or watch TV or play with the dogs. My daughter has 2 dogs, so she is happy to play with it rather than be in school listening to some lectures which may or may not be interesting. So the same situation can cause dukkham for some, sukham for somebody else. It's not dependent on the situation or the object. So that is why the feeling is what feeling we feel inside our heart. Hridaya Akasha means our heart space, not somebody else's heart space. So that is what is dukkham, one of the meanings of dukkham. There is another meaning of dukkham which is pratikulataya vedaniyam dukkham. A situation that makes us feel uncomfortable, pratikulaya means that which is not favorable, that which makes us feel unfavorable or uncomfortable. That situation is dukkham. We are going somewhere, they are behaving a certain way or they are doing some things that makes us feel uncomfortable. Sometimes we see some poor people on the streets in India, and sometimes you see that their poverty is so difficult to see for some of us, that creates an uncomfortable feeling. That is dukkham, it creates a dukkham. So dukkham is a situation where something is feeling tight. There is a tightness inside us, and that is one of the symptoms. When you see somebody who is not having a stable mind, then they can have some form of suffering. Anytime we are suffering, our mind is not stable. You see, recently, 2 weeks ago, there was some attacks in Paris. All the people were suffering. So their mind is not stable. Their mind is very much involved in fear. So they have a dukkham, feeling of dukkham. It's a dark energy, this dukkham. Acharya Krishnamacharya says dukkham is associated with what is called tamoguna. Tamoguna avartinaha dukkham. It is dependent on tamas, which is the dark energy, the heavy energy. It makes you feel heavy. That's what shuts down. So that is one of the symptoms. Then comes what is called daurmanasya. In a very simple translation, daurmanasya is the feeling of pessimism or negative thinking. We don't think positive. We are thinking, oh, the world is a terrible place. Everybody doesn't like us. Oh, we are not meant to live. Oh, people don't like us. Oh, these people are nasty towards us. We are always looking at things negatively. When there is a cup of glass or a tea is given to somebody, somebody always finds fault with that. We are always looking at what is wrong with things. This is also what is called daurmanasya. Now, sometimes when you give a cup of tea to somebody and they're saying, oh, it's not full, they're looking at it as a negative. It's not full. Oh, it's not hot enough. Oh, it's not cold enough. It's too strong. It's not in the right color. There's not enough bubbles. We always find something to complain about. That is daurmanasya, negative thinking. We find fault with others, we find fault with ourselves. Both, that is daurmanasya, that is negative thinking. When people are having such kind of behavior, such kind of thought processes, that is also what is called daurmanasya. Daurmanasya. But there's also a very fascinating explanation to daurmanasya, because the opposite of daurmanasya is saumanasya, which is a pleasant mind. A mind that is very pleasant, positive, etc. But that comes from the word sumanasya, saumanasya. It's like the mind is flowing smoothly. The mind, or when we say mind, emotions, etc. are flowing smoothly. Now, this is a remarkable, phenomenal concept. When you look at things, nature, whatever is in nature, etc., they follow the natural tendency. They follow a natural tendency. I look at some of the animals we have, the cats we have, they are following their natural tendency. They want to be a cat. They don't want to be an elephant, or they don't want to be a dog. They don't want to be a coconut tree. They want to be who they are. If you look at an apple tree or a papaya tree, it wants to be an apple tree. The apple tree does not think, oh, I should become a papaya tree. It's following its natural cycle. Mango tree wants to be a mango tree, doesn't want to be a pineapple. But not only that, the mango tree is not productive all the time. It's productive only in the right season. It's able to give fruit only at a particular season. This is natural. I'm not talking about genetically modified things, but natural tendency of a tree is that there is a season for fruits and there is season where there is no fruits. So all these things, when you interpret in the context of a human person, Daurmanasya also includes this, that we have to follow our natural potentials. Some of us are meant to be musicians, we should become musicians. Some of us are meant to be scientists, we should be scientists. Some of us are meant to be a yoga teacher, we have to be a yoga teacher, etc. There is natural predispositions and potentials. In yoga, in Ayurveda, they say this all depends on what is called the prakriti, the constitution. Yoga teachers or healers, etc., they have to have a certain constitution. A pizza delivery man has to have a different kind of constitution. It's not the same. Similarly, a person who is a warrior has to have a certain constitution, not another one. So they talk about all this because the seeds that we have, if we allow it to flow naturally, then there is no conflict. Whereas we don't like what we are, either because of ourselves or because of imposition from society. When child wants to be following its natural potential, sometimes parents say, no, you cannot do that, you have to do something else. You cannot be an artist or a musician because that's not going to earn enough money. You have to become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer that gets you a lot of money. So things like that are brainwashed. So we kind of start thinking differently and start flowing against our potential. This is also Daurmanasya. The mind wants to move one way, but we go against it. We don't allow the fluidity of our potentials. We go the opposite way. That's why we create conflict and stress. Why you think modern era has so many stress-related disorders? This is part of the stress. If I expect my cats to behave like a well-trained dog, it's not going to work. If I expect my cat to behave like an elephant which can do circus tricks, it's not going to work. It's going to be under stress. And eventually either it will run away or it will become sick. The same thing happens to us. When we don't want to be ourselves, we are rejecting ourselves, we want to be like somebody else. I don't like myself, I want to be like Michael Jackson, or I don't like myself, I want to be like James Bond. We start creating these expectations. Then it creates problems because we are going against the natural flow of things. Sumanasya, allow the mind, the deep mind, the subconscious mind, the deep mind, etc., to flow naturally. That is Sumanasya, Saumanasya. The opposite, Daurmanasya, you are restricting the natural flow. You are constricting it. Eventually what happens? We get choked. We are choking or suffocating ourselves, trying to be somebody else that we cannot be ever. And that is the problem. Eventually we will get sick, and eventually also at the extent we will die. And this death is not mortality. We die because we are not alive. We are not alive. We die inside. That is what is the concept of Daurmanasya as well, which we have to consider. That is also a sign of a mind that is disturbed. Then comes Angame Jayatva. The body, parts of the body, they are not stable, they are having some instabilities. Simple example is the hands and the body starts shaking. Suppose you are in some kind of disturbance, your mind and body does not work very well. It's a simple example, classic cliche. When people are nervous, they have to walk up and down and they have to go to the restroom often. They have to relieve themselves because they are under tension. Now, that's what is the disturbance in the mind is creating some physiological imbalances. Now, this is very, very significant. Because when you look at many of the imbalances that we have in the body, which is in the form of disease, you have fever, you have ulcers, you have constipation, you have diarrhea and all this. These are all physiological problems, but even to the extent like cancer, autoimmune disorders and things like that, they are all physiological problems. When you interpret the sutra, they are all coming from somehow disturbance of the mind or emotions. And I am seeing this more and more that, for example, people who have a lot of anger related issues, the pitta aggravates. It's an emotion, anger, but the anger is not resolved. The pitta rises and therefore it creates pitta related problem like skin problems or gastric problems, or at the extreme even disorders like cancer and other autoimmune disorders, etc., which are what is defined as angamejayatva, which is physiological imbalances in the body. Physiological imbalances in the body. And the more and more I am working in the domain of yoga therapy, I realize more and more how many physiological problems are essentially coming from some very deep emotional, psychological issues and not necessarily physical. Many things. Even sometimes stiffness in the body, sometimes as simple as that. Because when emotionally you are feeling tense, all the muscles also tense up and they become very tight. Therefore, it restricts your flexibility. So, that is what is angamejayatva. Angamejayatva means there is a disturbance of the normal parameters of the body. By nature, we are not necessarily meant to be sick, we are meant to be healthy. And there is, body has the capacity of what is called a samana state. We call it in the yoga and Ayurveda system, samatva state. In modern science, we call it the homeostasis. Body has the capacity to bring itself back to normal. If you allow it, if you don't allow it, and that is what a disturbed mind does, it somehow fights the natural capacities, it creates imbalances of different kinds. There is so many imbalances that are created, and that is why we have so many forms of suffering. Any imbalance from what is natural. Now, this is also something which we have to understand, that what is natural is not an average that is governed by statistics. Like somebody measures 1 million people and say this should be natural. Everybody should sleep 8 hours a day, we are saying. It's not necessarily correct. In yoga and Ayurveda, they say each person's constitution is different. A vata dominant person needs lesser sleep. A pitta dominant person needs a little bit more sleep than the vata dominant person. A kapha dominant person needs much more sleep. So there is different aspects as well. So what is normal? So you can't say, oh, somebody who sleeps less than 8 hours is insomnia. We don't define insomnia like that. In the traditional sciences, we say, oh, if a vata dominant person is not able to sleep for 6 hours or less or more, then he has maybe insomnia. If a pitta dominant person is sleeping only less than 8 hours, then he has insomnia. But if a kapha dominant person sleeps less than 10 hours, then he has insomnia. If a kapha dominant person sleeps for 8 hours, it is insomnia. If a vata dominant person sleeps for 8 hours, it is not insomnia. So even diseases is not measured by an average statistic. And it's the same. What's a normal blood pressure for somebody? We all say now 120/80. It's not possible to say that for different constitution of people and different age of individuals. Age plus constitution creates interesting dynamic, etc. Plus the traditional sciences of yoga and Ayurveda were not biased by the influence of pharmaceutical businesses. When you go 25, 30 years ago, the normal blood pressure was presented as 130/90. And later a group of pharmacy companies said, well, if we make it 120 by 80, more people will fall under the out of normal category. So we will be able to sell more drugs. So it increases our profits by so and so percentage. So they expanded the limitation. There's a fascinating book written by a great doctor from Bangalore called B.N. Hegde, who's written this book called What Medical School Does Not Teach You or Does Not Tell You. And if you read these books, you will see how many of these things that we are calling in normal medical practices basically are not necessarily true because they are supported by the pharmaceutical industry's vested interest. And so when you realize this, it coincides with the theories of yoga that you cannot have an average value that is normal for everybody. What's normal height, what's normal weight, etc. is different for individuals as there is differences in the constitution. So this angame jayatva, these imbalances in the physiological dimensions must not be looked at equally, must be looked at based on different constitution type, different individuals, and that is what is the great gift of yoga and Ayurveda, because it looks at each of us as different. That's also what is the greatest challenge, because we cannot look at everybody the same. And we have a natural capacity for us to compare ourselves with others, and that's why we suffer. But this is another thing. There is an imbalance in the physiological structures when the mind is disturbed. Suppose there is an issue that concerns you. You don't sleep very well. We have some friends who were here last week who are part of the yoga teacher training program we are doing here. And one of the persons is a French lady who has some friends and family in Paris. When this incident happened, she could not sleep the whole evening, the whole day. For 2-3 days, she could not sleep because there was so much agitation. That disturbs sleep. That disturbs appetite. That disturbs her energy level. This is angame jayatva, sleep pattern, appetite pattern, energy level, body's reactions, etc. Where does it come from? It comes from some deep emotional issue, which is the fear, the anxiety. She could not contact some people who had families there because phones were down. There was a case of emergency shutdown. Many things were happening which she could not control. So emotional disturbance, mental, psychological disturbance created so many physiological disturbance. That is what the sutra is saying. Angame jayatva is, in a simple way, physiological diseases. Shwasa prashwasa, the fourth symptom, the breath is disturbed. Breathing pattern is disturbed. And the breathing pattern can be disturbed in so many different ways. The breath can become shorter, the breath can become interrupted, breath can become weak, the breath can become heavy. So many different ways the breathing can get disturbed. But the disturbance of breath also comes because something is agitating the mind. Simple example, when you are going through airport security, for example, in some places you see all these people with all these guns and this and that, checking if you are having anything dangerous. You get so nervous going through that. Your breath also becomes shorter, your breath becomes tighter. The moment you pass through and you are cleared, you feel a bit more relieved. Breath becomes longer, breath becomes relaxed. You can see that very well in a child. When you are holding, a mother is holding the child's breath is so long, so relaxed. But somebody scary starts to go take the child. Even before they take the child starts to panic and its breathing starts to get affected. So shwasa prashwasa is the breathing capacity also changes. The breathing also changes. That is why, my friends, this is a very important symptom to observe. In all the classical teachings of yoga and Ayurveda, they would say observe breath, because you can hide your dukkham. You can hide your daurmanasya, your negativity. Suppose you don't communicate to somebody, or you just have a smile and you say, oh, everything is fine, no problem. You can hide these things. You can hide your symptoms. Suppose you are not sleeping, you have dark circles under your eye. You have like nowadays like eye mask or eye something, you put your cream and you can hide it. But you can never hide your breathing. That is why in the ancient times they always took the pulse, because the pulse would tell us the quality of our breathing pattern, whether you want to, whether you have agitation, whether you have fear, whether you have anxiety. So many things can be communicated through the pulse. That's why Acharya Krishnamacharya and Kausthub Desikachar and all these great masters, they were always taking the pulse when they were dealing with PhD students to teach yoga, but more importantly in the domain of yoga therapy. Without taking the pulse, we don't know everything that is going on inside the person. So the pulse diagnosis, what is called Nadi Pariksha, is very, very important, because that talks to us about the quality of our breathing. We can do our own examination if we have the knowledge, but if not, we can ask somebody who has the knowledge to help us understand ourselves, because we are also not so used to observing our own breathing. We are very disconnected from our own breath. But that is why in yoga tradition they are saying, in every tool of yoga, whether it's asana or pranayama or meditation or whatever, always focus on the breath, because the breath is revealing to you the quality of your state of mind, your state of existence at that time. So listen to the breathing, observe the breathing, because that is a very important symptom. So these are the 4 different kind of symptoms that the great Patanjali is presenting for somebody who is called as Chitta Vikshepa, Chitta Vikshepa Sahabhuvaha. In explaining these sutras in the commentaries of different acharyas, they try to understand what is the concept of Chitta Vikshepa, why we have the concept of Chitta Vikshepa. Acharya Krishnamacharya presents 2 brilliant ideas here, which some of you may agree with, some of you may not, because of this idea, you will see this. What Acharya Krishnamacharya says is, a Chitta Vikshepa mind is a mind that does not have what is called Shraddha and Bhakti. Shraddha Bhakti na bhavayati saha Chitta Vikshepaha. The person who is not having the 2 attributes of Shraddha and Bhakti. Shraddha means a conviction or faith. Suppose you have a very deep conviction or faith in yourself, or in a divine being, or in a higher being, or in a spiritual entity, whether it's a theistic entity or a non-theistic entity, but you have the feeling of Shraddha, a conviction, and what is called Bhakti, a feeling of devotion. Devotion also, theistic or non-theistic, in the sense theistic devotion is devotion to a god or a deity, but non-theistic devotion is you live life with devotion. Be a surrender to life and embrace life with devotion, as if every action you are doing in life, as if it was a prayer. As if it was a prayer. When those 2 attributes are not there, mind is agitated. That is Chitta Vikshepa. Because when you have conviction and when you have devotion, mind will be stable. It will not shake. It will not oscillate so easily. It will not collapse so easily, no matter what happens. And some of these acharyas have faced so many difficulties when I think about all the acharyas like Ramanujacharya, Vedanta Deshika, etc., acharyas who lived 1,000 years ago, 1,200 years ago, etc. Even other philosophers from other schools tried to kill these people. So they were facing so many obstacles, yet they did not collapse, because they had this great devotion, they had this great bhakti, and that kept them strong, that did not let them collapse with Chitta Vikshepa. It didn't make their mind weaker. Why? Because they had this concept of Shraddha and Bhakti. These are great attributes that again is presented in the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. Patanjali already talks about Shraddha. And bhakti, he is talking about it through the Ishvara Pranidhana sutras. So he uses the word pranidhana as a synonym for bhakti. Acharya Krishnamacharya defines pranidhanam as bhakti vishesha, a special form of bhakti. So Shraddha and bhakti is presented in the Yoga Sutra as well, where the aspect is we are living our life with faith, not fear. The opposite of faith is fear. The opposite of conviction is doubts. We are living with faith or conviction rather than fear or doubts or confusion. At the same time, also having a devotional attitude, which is that we are not the masters of the world. The nature and the world is greater than we are. We want to go somewhere. Okay, we want to go somewhere. We want to plan something with our friends. There is a cyclone that comes and you cannot prevent it. We are not the master of the world. Accept it. You cannot fight it. You have to accept the flow of nature. When things go up, accept it. When things go down, accept it. That is what is devotion to life. It's not only devotion to a deity. That is in the context of religious devotion. But as we already discussed a few weeks ago, yoga philosophy is not completely religious. It is a spiritual philosophy which embraces both religious and non-theistic form of spirituality. So that is why this is very important to understand. For those who are the theistic philosophers or the theistic practitioners, Acharya Krishnamacharya presents the second concept of what is Chitta Vikshepa. He says, Chitta Vikshepa is a state where we are having a devotional attitude to the divine. We're forgetting the devotional attitude to the divine, and we are actually a servant or devoted to objects or material. He uses this word Samahita Chittaha, which means a stable-minded person is a person who has Ishvara Seva Sthitihi, who is devoted to the divine. Vikshepa Chittaha Bahya Vastu Upasevana Sthitihi is a state where we are serving or servants of external objects. This is materialism. When we become slaves to material objects and we are always pursuing material objects, that is Chitta Vikshepa, because if we are so attached to objects like our car or our house or our clothes or our other things which are all objects which are external, it can create a lot of suffering. Any car you buy in India, in our streets, will not remain scratchless for more than a day. Somebody will come, one auto rickshaw guy will come, scratch it and stop near you in the signal and just look at you and say, "Sorry sir," and keep going. You will have just bought the car and it would be scratched. You will be so angry because you cannot control that. The guy will just say, "Sorry sir," and go. Some people will not even say sorry. At least the auto man is nice and say sorries. Some people who don't care, they will just keep going. So when you have so much of focus on material object, even new clothes, some people I've seen buy some new clothes and come in our streets. Sometimes our water system is not so clean, so there are puddles of water on the streets. You're walking on the street, one guy, the bike or a car or a bus will go on the water, water will splash, dirty water will splash all over your clothes. You get so agitated. This is why our mind is agitated, because we are servants to external objects. Bahya Vastu Upasevana Sthitihi. We are in the state where we are worshipping external objects. This is our materialism, the modern era's philosophy. Worship material objects. That is what is practiced now, capitalism. Spiritualism is not practiced now. We are forgetting that. And that is the problem here. We are not dedicated or devoted to the divine. And in Acharya Krishnamacharya's view, the divine is not somebody who is outside. He always says the divine is who is within you. We call this in the Vedic tradition Antaryami. He is the person who is residing in your heart. That is the divine, not somebody who is only in a temple or in a religious institution, accessible only through certain people. That is not the divine. Acharya Krishnamacharya says, this divine is in your heart, always accessible. Always accessible. And that is what Patanjali also slowly says later. Our perception is outward. And he says at some point we have to turn the mind inward so that we realize what is within our heart. The mind becomes like a mirror so that it reflects what is inside. Rather than a glass which is see-through, it becomes a mirror and it reflects. Chitehe aprati sankramayaha tad akara apattau swabuddhi samvedanam. What is within our heart, we start to have a realization of that when the mind is cutting its direction outward and actually turning inward, because it takes the form of a mirror. And that is why the yoga system is called a darshana, that which reveals what is inside us. When you stand in front of the mirror, you see yourself, swabuddhi samvedanam, you realize yourself. Nobody has to tell that is you. You realize when you are in front of the mirror that this is who you are. And that is what is the highest state of yoga, and that is what we call this as self-realization. Self-realization. We realize that divine self that is in our heart. So this is what Acharya Krishnamacharya defines as the state of chitta vikshepa, when we are disconnected from the light in our heart and actually obsessed with the material things that are outside. So that is essentially the last part of the sutra 131. So in essence, what this sutra 131 is saying is that for somebody whose mind is not stable, whose mind is devoid of the qualities of Shraddha and bhakti, 4 symptoms start to appear. Dukkha, suffering; Daurmanasya, negative mind; Angamejayatva, imbalances in our physiological structure; Shwasa Prashwasa, disturbances in our breathing capacity. So that is the essential summary of the sutra 131. Dukkha Daurmanasya Angamejayatva Shvasa Prashvasaha Vikshepa Saha Bhovaha.